Welcome to At Home with Myself. I'm Kylie Zeal.
And I'm Magali de Castro.
This show is all about creating a better, stronger, and more enjoyable relationship with yourself.
Because your relationship with yourself is the longest relationship you will ever have.
Hi, Magali.
Hello, Kylie.
Hi. How are you excited about our topic today?
I'm super excited. It's an extremely timely topic.
I think so too. That's why I'm excited about it. I feel like this whole conversation is just going to come quite naturally because I've been dealing with it a lot in my own self and with my clients, and just it's everywhere. It's in social media, it's in the news, it's all of the kind of stress, anxiety, and lots of people's internal chatter going on because of what's going on in the world. But even as I say these words, what's going on in the world, I don't think that this episode will ever go out of date, because even if someone listened to it like a year from now, there'll be a new what's going on in the world happening. So I think this kind of topic is always going to be relevant.
Definitely. So we're looking at calm today as the fifth element.
Yep. In my book,
element.
Seven Freedom Elements. This is the fifth element, correct.
Obviously, one of the things that we do is that we reread the chapter in the lead up to discussing it. And obviously, being a book that was published, a few years back. How many years back? Is it now a couple of years old?
4 years old, I think, maybe, depending. Well, it was published again. It was published twice. The first time I published it was self-published, but then it was picked up by a publisher in New York. And so that happened early 2018. Gosh, I have to think now. So really, that was only 2 years, not even 2 years ago.
When you first published it, then I read it when it got republished, and then I just read this chapter again last night. And every time, obviously, because I don't know if it's like we're a slightly different person or a very different person as we've evolved along the way, I get something new and completely different in a really good way out of it. But it just felt super timely because as part of work, ironically, at the moment, we're doing this thing called a big, hairy, audacious goal, where we had to pick essentially just, a medium term goal, still technically short, it's like a 6-month goal that had to have an element of trickiness and scariness, but it's also something that we really wanted to do. And I actually picked meditation. So I wanted to do 200 hours of meditation. So going from 0 to 200, which would lock me into at least doing an hour to an hour and a half every day. So actually now I'm on like day 46, 47-ish. So I've done about at least like 47-ish hours of meditation, like nonstop over the last month and a half. So it's sort of been running, calm has been running my days in a very, so rereading that chapter was like, oh my goodness, so many of these concepts I've been living in so experientially for the last month. Yeah.
Wow, I did not know that you were doing that. I mean, we've obviously spoken, it was probably been a couple of weeks actually since we've spoken, but that was obviously not more than, what'd you say? You're up to day 47. I'm so impressed with this. As I speak about in this chapter, how challenging it was for me to do the meditation, though I did it and I got massive rewards from doing it. It's rarely without challenge for me to get into a regular meditation practice because I have quite an active mind. So I am super keen to hear what it's been like for you to go on this meditation journey. But perhaps before we actually get into what you've experienced, like how did you start? How did you maintain the practice? What have you experienced as time went on? I wonder if we should talk first about like why would we even bother wanting to get into a practice like meditation?
Yeah, well, and you address it quite nicely in the book in terms of, you talk about that the constant inner chatter, that inner voice that you may not even realize that it's there, but it's there for most, if not all of us. But as we have talked about a little bit before, it's definitely very present there for me. But as you were identifying in other conversations that we've had, it's not actually necessarily the case for everybody, but it does seem to be the case for most people.
Yeah, I've learned some people think in pictures, so they're less likely to have an experience of dialogue, but they're no less likely to have the experience of stress and worry. It's just how that shows up. It might be in like pictures and images and like an experience. Whereas I, and I think you as well, Magali, very much have this experience of like a voice in our head. So that's why it was quite clear in my chapter when I was talking about the voice in my head, or in everybody's head, without really, at the time of writing it, I think I even didn't understand at that time the extent to which, you know, it's not the same experience for everyone, though I think the message doesn't get lost. So yeah, absolutely, that's a big part of why we want to do meditation, or at least practice calm. So I think I want to mention here as well, before we scare off anyone who's listening and has negative associations with the whole concept of meditation, is that what we're talking about ultimately is creating calm in your life so you don't have a lot of stress and anxiety. And meditation is a great way of doing that, though it's not the only way. And the other thing I want to mention as well, before we get deeper into a conversation about your experience of meditation, is calm commitment. Because it's about, you know, if we make a commitment to meditate, for example, like you did, you know, you're at day 47, and I made a commitment to practice, I think it was twice a day for, I can't remember how many days it was now, it was a lot. That once that commitment is made, it can be all too tempting to give ourselves a hard time or be really strict about how it happens, which is the opposite of calm.
Yeah, it defeats the purpose of the
yeah, exactly. It defeats the purpose. And I wrote down something that I had once heard in an audio book between Alice Walker, that amazing author. She wrote The Color Purple, and she was having a conversation with Pema Chodron, and Alice Walker was saying to Pema, so what do you do? Like, if you miss a day of meditation, like, does that even happen to you? Do you ever miss a day? Because Alice Walker's assuming that would never happen to Pema Chodron. And the response was, yeah, like, you know, that does happen to me, but I don't worry about it. And that was like, you know, mic drop, end of conversation. Yeah, it happens. Some days I forget and whatever. And that, to me, just to hear someone that I considered quite spiritual and calm to look at it that way was so eye-opening, to realize this is the point. The point is not to meditate every day for a particular amount of time. The point is calm. And if meditation helps create that, great, even better. But if there are also other ways that we can do that in our lives, great. So I wanted to have added that in before we scare people off around meditation. And all that said, please tell me more about how it's going. Like, why did you choose this as the big hairy goal? What was it like getting started? What systems did you put in place? Because I think creating a habit and committing to a goal requires putting certain systems in place to help us achieve them. And then what was the experience as you went along? So lots of questions there, Magali, but over to you.
Lots of questions. Well, to begin with, actually, the idea, like, this was a work initiative to come up with a big, hairy, audacious goal. Obviously, it's a voluntary thing that team members could participate in a way to make it even more appealing, to essentially help employees or teammates feel empowered to chase after a personal goal. So this was not necessarily, it was actually encouraged that it wasn't a business goal, essentially, or a workplace goal. This is a personal goal. So in order to make it an even more enticing thing, the company was putting $500 towards you achieving that goal, and you can spend that in whatever way you saw fit that would help you achieve that personal goal. But the condition is that the goal has to qualify as a big, hairy, and audacious goal. So it's not just something that you're going to be able to achieve fairly easily. It's something that's going to take you at least 6 to 9 months to achieve. So with that in mind, a lot of people were choosing like physical fitness goals, and some people wanted to run a marathon or a half marathon or beat their cycling time or do a big swim or a big climb. And I was actually thinking one of the coaching sessions that you and I had, where you were helping me identify things that I enjoy about, like, exercise, and why some forms of exercise I find more appealing or less appealing. And essentially, like, we were getting down to the core motivation that would make something stick. And the big thing that I took out of that was that it has to align, for me to stick to something, it has to align with something that I believe in my core, something that I really value, that aligns with my values, that aligns with what I want to get out of life. Because otherwise it just ends up being something too superficial, and then I just kind of get over it, get bored with it. And there's no kind of innate drive, and the motivation just kind of vanishes as soon as willpower goes away. So with that in mind, I'm like, well, what are the things that I, my core values, the things that I want to get out of life? And obviously, as you know, I'm big into kind of self-knowledge, self-discovery, finding out the meaning of life, spirituality. And so with that, I was like, I've never actually done meditation properly. I've done a couple of kind of guided meditation sessions, or I might have been in a retreat and they've done a meditation, but I've never been the type to meditate. And I have a very strong mental chatter. So it'd be very interesting to be able to find a way to change that relationship with the mental chatter, or just see what happens. So a big part of it was just a curiosity, and knowing that it's partly my core value interest that would keep me motivated and would keep me going, because I just wanted to discover. Like, I didn't know what I didn't know. I just wanted to see what it would be like. That was the motivation. That was the kind of the starting point for choosing that. So in terms of how I got started, the other thing that made it hairy for me is that there was a condition that it had to be silent meditation. So this is not I don't have any music going in the background. There's no guided anything happening. It's just silent meditation, sitting lotus style, kind of yogi style, for an hour every day. So that felt a bit daunting as someone who has a very active mind and who gets very easily distracted, and who usually can't sit still, unless I'm being stimulated by external stuff. So that's how it started. But and it was really, like, to begin with, like, I sort of looked at some like, I've started reading some books and some of the theory, and learned a little bit about different types of meditation. Obviously, mindfulness is huge at the moment. So there's a lot of information on mindfulness. And I really enjoyed that, or I really loved that concept of mindfulness as you're fully present in the present, and all your awareness and all of your intention is in the present. There's an element of kindness as well. And there's an element of non-judgment. So you're not trying to make thoughts go away, which is what I've really struggled with in the past. Like, trying to get a blank mind is like that. That's very difficult. And there's a lot of strain and stress. It's you're allowing the thoughts, you're watching or witnessing the thoughts, and you're not judging them. You're not trying to get rid of them, but you're also not becoming invested in them and chasing them down whatever rabbit hole they want to take you. So I really enjoyed that as a concept. So that was my starting point. Essentially, I'm just going to sit for an hour. I put a timer on my watch so that it would just vibrate after the hour, and I would just sit and essentially practice mindfulness without any kind of guided meditation or anything. So that's how it started. And then but then I'm happy to talk about how it evolved, because then you inevitably get the challenge of, like, this is really hard. Like, your mind's like, I would glance down at the clock, go, what? That's only 10 minutes? Oh my God. Like, I felt like that was 2 hours already. So going from 0 to that was very, very tricky. Obviously, like, part of me, there's this sort of like egoic trip thing of like, oh, I wonder if I'm gonna like have an out of body experience, and like that sort of, which is natural. Like, it's just like you can't help, like, ego can't help but get swept up in it as well. So initially,
for all the effort that I'm putting on, I should at least start levitating. Like, exactly. I deserve it.
Some kind of supernatural metaphysical payoff for this. So initially what I found is like, it's very, very hard. But then, like, I started kind of realizing how, if I'm fighting, like, I'm trying to be present and I'm trying to kind of find that calm and that joy and that peace, But if the whole time I'm just looking at the clock and I'm like, oh, is it done yet? Is it over yet? Like, that's already defeating the purpose.
Yes, exactly.
So that probably took me about a week of doing that until I realized, no, I need to shift the attitude. I need to find a way of enjoying, or like realizing that the process is the purpose. So then things sort of started shifting to going, okay, let me just like, like just relax more into it, as opposed to it being a discipline of I have to sit here for an hour. It almost like it became more about like allowing or seeing that the movie that was happening in the screen of all those thoughts that were coming up, and almost going, oh, that's interesting, and just again keeping my distance. So you're just kind of watching it like it's like a movie that you're not attached to. You're just sort of seeing it go by. So that's how things sort of started evolving. But then now it's sort of taken, and then I started feeling like actually it's okay to sometimes break it up, because sometimes I would only have enough time to do half an hour. So then I would do like 2 half-hour sessions, because I started realizing it wasn't necessarily that after, like, the longer I did it, the more, calm I became. Sometimes the quieting of the mind would happen even after the first minute or two. So it wasn't a matter of the more I do it, the more calm I am, but I am finding that the overall change is by having more of that experiential awareness of what it's like to not be invested and involved in the chatter. It gives you the space to have a point of reference. So if you're going about your daily life and something upsets you or something throws you off balance, you can feel it. Like you have a very recent point of comparison of what it's like to be in real quiet balance. So you can, instead of just getting involved in it, you can kind of very quickly go, let me pause and let me see what's happening here. Why am I getting out of balance?
Oh, I love that. Can I say something about that? Yeah, because I think the ongoing chatter, maybe even stress and anxiety, but the constancy of that, the mind movement is normal for the great majority of people. And so what I'm hearing is you're creating a new normal. And so then it's easy to see the difference when you start going into the place of a lot of chatter, maybe even stress or just, feeling tense. So I think that's got to be one of the most powerful benefits of doing meditation, is the creation of a new normal.
The other thing is relating to a previous chapter that we had on energy. What I found is the impact on my mental energy, because we talked about physical energy versus like your mental and emotional sort of energy. And it feels like when I'm meditating, that is the one time where my mental energy is like plugging a phone into the wall to recharge. So it's like it's as if the mind gets to have this time to stop that constant stimulation and that constant run, interpret things, absorb information, do things with things, to just go, right, I can just kind of now settle and recharge. So even I did this the other day where I had a very busy morning, and then at lunchtime, I just did a 20-minute meditation. And after that, and I just would just try to be very protective of that space and that time. After those 20 minutes, it felt like I had just woken up. It was almost like I got to have a redo of the day. It was as if it was actually more restful than when I've ever had a power nap, because I actually feel really groggy after I take a short nap. Whereas this was like when you just wake up after a really restful full night's sleep, even though I had had a full morning worth of very mentally draining work. So I thought like that was, and that only happened, a couple of days ago. So I thought like this has a lot of promise. Like that's quite exciting. The other thing is the clarity in terms of like when I'm, I don't get as invested in the small stuff, the everyday small stuff. So if I'm working, I find it easier to take a step back and see the bigger picture, as opposed to just get caught up in a detail that would usually stress me. And that at the end of the day, I could spend hours and hours worrying or playing with and get to no tangible conclusion. Whereas being in that state of balance allows you to see things more clearly, because you're just kind of you're taking a more considered approach, or at least that's my experience so far.
I have a question which you've half already answered, but I just want to clarify around the concept of opportunity cost, because really for every hour or more that you spend in meditation, that's an hour that you could be, checking things off your to-do list. And if your to-do list is anything like mine, it's very long. And so can you clarify your experience of, opportunity cost and why it's worth spending time, an hour in meditation?
Yeah, I think one of the big things is as I became more aware of that calm, like when you're experiencing the calm and not just intellectualizing what the calm is. So what that meant was I was able to see the impact that things like browsing social media was having on me. Now, browsing social media is one of those time black holes where you don't realize how long you spend of a day that's essentially wasted from just going through Instagram posts or just scrolling through a Facebook feed, or even YouTube was like my big vice, where you just go video after video after video. And so what I think a lot of people may not realize is that there's actually already a lot of time in the day that it's allocated, that you're not actually spending on getting that to-do list done, that is just being wasted or sucked away by these distractions that we feel are relaxing, but actually they're all designed to stimulate you further and keep you engaged on that platform. That's by design. That's what they're meant to do. So you feel like you're resting, but you're actually not. You're not actually in that calm space. If anything, your mind is getting more and more worked up. So that was one of the first things that just went. So by me, essentially, I now only go into Facebook to wish happy birthdays to whoever's birthday it is, and I may check Instagram if there's like a message from someone, and I might check like 2 stories and close it. But aside from that, I'm not in social media platforms at the moment pretty much at all. So that plus quarantine meant that like I just had so much more time in my day.
Can I just say that's so good? I reckon that was profound when I think about how much time people spend on social media. And when we talk about the concept of opportunity cost, the opportunity cost is not very high. Like that's an easy one to give up. So we could easily find that extra time in our day. I just thought that's brilliant.
Yeah, I think the falsehood in it is that a lot of us think of those escapes as, oh, this is my escape, this is my relaxing time, this is my me time. But that's actually it's a falsehood, because what it's really doing, yes, it might be distracting you away from something else that you find stressful, but it's not, and at least this is my experience, don't, as Byron Katie says, don't believe me, like test it all out for yourself. But this was my experience, that it felt like a me time, and it felt like a treat, and it felt like a rest, or a relaxation, but it wasn't. It was just distracting me away from this other stressful thought. But this thing in and of itself was actually really stimulating and really getting my mind going, and really essentially not conducive to what I thought it was giving me, which was, this release, this like, I can rest. It actually was stressing me out more without me realizing in other ways. It was just stressing me out about other themes and other things in my life, or, from a social point, or what else is happening, or news, or so that was the first kind of fallacy. And you don't realize how you feel like you're only spending a couple of minutes here and there. But if you were to actually add it all up, it's a lot. Like, it's hours and hours that most people would spend without realizing, because it's just like, oh, it's just a few minutes here and a few minutes there. But by the time you realize that wasn't just a few minutes, that was, sometimes 30 to 45 minutes in one chunk. Because there's so much variety, it feels like it's only little snippets. But when you add it all up, it's actually taking a big chunk out of your life and out of your mental energy, because all of that takes energy to process, to take in that information, to interpret it. So that's all draining for the mind as well. And the mind is not getting a rest. So you're using up your mental charge. You're not recharging it. So that was one thing. The other thing was that the more of that space that I had, the more calm that I had, the more that to-do list, what I noticed was it got smaller, because it was almost like my mind got better at seeing through the noise and going, what actually really needs to get done, and what actually is the most, where am I going to get most bang for buck? So it's almost like that to-do list that might have been, 10 items long, all of a sudden became, 5 items long. But those 5 items, the impact of those 5 items was the equivalent of, 30 of my old items, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
I don't know if that makes sense. It's just, it's
It
just
definitely makes sense. Yeah. I'm feeling inspired. Like I haven't been
actually,
doing a lot. So are you going to say something else?
the only thing that I was going to say is the other big thing is that it does, as I said before, it doesn't have to be one whole hour at a time. So now the shape that it's taking is like, I'll wake up, and instead of just like, oh, I'm just going to lie in bed for, another 10 minutes, I'm just going to sneak in a quick 10-20 minute meditation. I've got my watch on, I put the timer on, just 20 minutes. I've just woken up and I've got the time. So it's like, that's the time that usually would we spend browsing with your phone. It's like, oh, let me check emails, let me check. Actually, this is the time where I just sneak in a 20-minute meditation session, and then maybe around lunchtime another 20 minutes, and then in the evening again, it's very easy to at some point squeeze another 20 minutes. So it doesn't have to be, I need to carve out an hour. It can actually be, a small amount throughout the day.
I'm feeling inspired.
Well, that's good.
I think maybe I could do a bit more around meditation, because I'm thinking about how I've been over the last sort of 6 months, and I think one of the reasons I don't give as much time to meditation as I potentially could, now that I'm listening to you, is because I am one of the least stressed people I know. Right? But I think I need you to confirm this, right? Because it sounds weird when it's just me saying it about myself. Like, because I tend to, I move at a fairly moderate pace, I think, and I'm regularly just taking moments of calm here and there. And this morning, for example, I took the dog down to the beach, and I incorporate a lot of calm activities into my day, and I'm quick to catch myself if I have a lot of stressful or ego thoughts. It's not uncommon for me to just stop everything I'm doing and sit for 5 minutes, almost like a micro meditation.
Yeah.
So that is normal for me. There was once upon a time that was the new normal, and that's just become just normal. But I can also see, especially with everything going on and what I'm trying to fit into my schedule and my to-do list, that there's still space for me to get more clarity around, like, I love what you said around the to-do list, and maybe there's some things that can be knocked off, and I'm somewhat doing that already, but I think I'm inspired to do better in this area without making it a stressful thing. The calm commitment. I'm inspired to do some more calm commitment around this right now. Thank you, Magali. And this is what comes out of doing 47 days of meditation. And speaking of which, right, what was your experience like as you went through? Because I think it was once I got into, because I went through similar phases with you when I committed to doing, I think it was like about an hour a day. Oh no, I was doing 2 sessions a day, morning and night. I had to do 2 a day, and they might have even only been about 20 minutes. But I went through the similar phase at the beginning where it was like, oh, really, has it only been 10 minutes? And aware of the actual minutes passing before I then went into the phase where I started to appreciate it and appreciate that it's the process that's important, not so much some kind of outcome.
Yeah.
And then for me, what came after that was a new experience in terms of going deeper into the meditation. And I would then have some physical sensations like I'd have the tingling in my hands and in other parts of my body. And I don't know exactly what that means, but in my own head, I had created a story of, this is me becoming one with all the energy around me, and which sounds kind of fun and cool. And that's what I chose to make it mean, but I don't actually know why you get this kind of tingly sensation.
Well, and to be completely transparent, like that was like 99% of the initial kind of ego trip of wanting to do it, is to experience that sort of stuff. It's like, oh, I wonder what will happen, and I wonder what, So which is defeating the purpose. It's like, you know, it kind of happens as a consequence, and doesn't necessarily always happen. Or like, it's like having a good conversation, you know, like sometimes you just get in the flow of it and you're like, oh my goodness, like I just feel alive, and I'm just, I feel connected to this person. But even if it's the same person and it was the same topic, like you may, if you have that same conversation 5 times, it's not going to be the same experience every time. And that's part of the beauty. It's just like that with meditation. Sometimes it's going to be, you know, sometimes it's going to be like you're going to go beyond or feel. I like this concept of getting to your true self is not about creating your true self, which is so much of what we see day to day. It's like, you know, you're making the person that you want to be and you're creating. Is actually more about undoing the things that you're not. So it's almost like, as you grow up, as part of your cultural and social conditioning, and all the things that you pick up in movies and from friends and from work, you take on all these layers and meanings and things that are not actually who you are. You just take them on because you're like, oh, that looks kind of cool, and that oh yeah, that looks like something that I would want. And then you become this sort of, like, imagine that you're just putting stickers, like putting stickers on a piece of luggage, and all of a sudden it's this like thing that's just covered in stickers, and you're like, I'm all these stickers, or I want new stickers. And it's like, actually the process of getting in contact with your true self, which, as you're saying, that tingling sensation, it's, to me, this is my personal interpretation, is actually what something like meditation or that calmness, getting in contact with that, allows you to strip back those layers and layers of stickers to go, I'm actually this beautiful suitcase underneath. And the beautiful suitcase is not just a suitcase, it's actually essentially the mantle of everything. Because what we are in essence is the awareness of what's happening. Yeah, it's the watcher, the witness, and there's all sorts of different books and theories and spiritualities that will refer to this, of the true essence and your true nature. So by quieting down or going beyond, or no longer kind of, yeah, almost like leaving that chatter behind, you get to actually be more in contact with that other essence. And of course, it can be, the experience of it can be very calming, but it can also be it can feel very pure, it can feel very beautiful, it can feel very a sense of connection, of love, of support, like, you know, a thousand different names for it.
I think, you know, a lot of the chatter, really, I'd link that to what we call ego. I think one of the goals of the ego, I don't know if goal is the right word, but one of the objectives of the ego is separateness, to have us feel that we are separate. And then what you're just talking about is that through the meditation and the quietening of all the chatter, the quietening of the ego, we realize, you know, we're not separate. It's, you know, we have these physical bodies, but there's this other part to us which is not physical, and that's not confined to anything. So yeah, without getting too deep into that conversation, because that might be a whole other podcast episode,
which we should definitely
yeah, that would be awesome. I think this is one of the benefits, though, of the meditation and the creating calm, is experiencing more of that connectedness, because I think sometimes one of the places our stress ultimately comes from is feeling alone and feeling separate, which is why then we sort of have these drives to do things to seek approval, because we're seeking connectionness. We're connectionness, is that a word? We're seeking connectedness. Yeah, and we're seeking, you know, people to like us, because if they like us, then they'll want to be with us, and then if people are being with us, then we're not alone. Whereas through meditation, I think we come to realize, well, I'm actually never alone.
Yeah.
So I love that. I'm thinking also that we should talk about other ways of creating calm. Yeah. So our whole episode is not entirely taken up with meditation, although it's completely appropriate, because I think that's one of the big ones. One of the big ways for creating calm is through this practice, this ancient practice called meditation. It's timeless as well. Because I talked about other ways of creating calm, and it's not exactly the same as doing meditation, but I've got a list of them there. writing's a big one for me. Walking is a big one for me. I like dancing at home when it's just me and the dog, no one watching. I'm dancing. But I feel all of these things get me present in the moment, bring me centered. How about you?
Definitely. I think, and from talking to clients as well, like, the clients that are big runners, they'll talk, and you mentioned that as well in your book, that running, it feels like a form of meditation to them. I'm not a runner, so that's not my experience, but I think it's like finding the thing that works for you. Because it does, there are a lot, it allows them to get to that point when they're just present, and it's just like that chatter goes away or is quieted down or is no longer the focus. Even if the chatter doesn't really go away, it's just you're not invested in it. Your attention and your energy is no longer on it or within it. So you're free, essentially. Even if it's there, you're not a slave to it, which is our experience usually when we're attached to that inner voice, the constant dialogue that can be quite crazy if we follow it. Like, it's just and the book The Untethered Soul, which you recommended to me, and I only just recently picked it up again, and I was like, oh my goodness, there's so much really good stuff. He kind of covers this whole, like, if you listen to it, like if you see the themes and how crazy it is, how it jumps from one area to the other, and it gives you terrible advice, and it just jumps to conclusions, and it's like, if you had a friend, if it was an external person that acted like that, you would never trust them for any advice. You would never, if you hired them as an expert in anything, you would fire them straight away because they clearly have no idea what they're talking about. And yet, because it's this internal voice, you just believe it all the time, even though if you were to look at it really objectively, it's all over the place, and it's just irrational, and it's like it just changes its position without any seeming, facts or any. So I found that really, really amusing, this concept of like that inner chatter is outrageous, and there are multiple ways. One of them being running, as you said, painting. That's one of the hobbies that we've picked up in the household now recently. We've just started painting miniatures. And it's so relaxing because you're just learning and seeing how the paint goes into the different crevices and things, and how it behaves, and what color you can create. And again, that's another, an hour, 2-3 hours that go by, and you're just quiet, you're present, you can't be in your head thinking about the shopping list or all the things that you gotta do. So it's all these ways that bring you to the present. I was re-listening to Eckhart Tolle's Power of Now, and he was talking about adrenaline and how people become addicted to the adrenaline rush when they're in that situation of danger, and his thought around that is because it forces you in that moment to be present. Like when you're having a life-threatening situation, or something that your body interprets as a life-threatening situation, it has to hone in the present, and there's a quality of calmness to it, and there's a quality of just full awareness in the present, which you could say that it's so that you have all your abilities there to manage the current situation, but you're not kind of lost in thought of like, oh yeah, these things happen in the past, or what could happen in the future. It's just an intense moment of being very present in the present. But then the trap with that is then people associate it with, no, it's just the adrenaline that I like. And it's like, well, actually the rush in his view is from an external situation that forced you into having to be present in the present, because otherwise, if you're distracted, you could die, essentially. Yeah. So that's the whole, like, I need to have all my senses and all my attention right now. So there's a release of the self, all these other concepts, all those labels, all those stickers that we have put all over the years on that piece of suitcase.
Yeah, it's like these situations that kind of force us to be present. So I guess whereas you're actively choosing to bring yourself to the present moment without relying on some kind of external drama or situation to force you into the present. Like, so you're actually building the internal muscle of creating that.
Yeah.
Which I think it's harder work. I think actually the adrenaline stuff you're talking about, those threatening situations that force you to be present, like they seem like they might be harder, but when we are forced to do something, it's extraordinary what we are capable of doing. Whereas you're not being forced to meditate, but still
No.
the outcome, what you are creating as a result of your practice, is extraordinary, no less.
Yeah. So I'm excited to see what happens with this. I think the more recent experiment is looking at how thoughts don't seem to ever be related to the present. So like, and this is a test. So I'm testing this. So as I'm finding I'll get caught up in, in a train of thought, I'm kind of looking at it going, is this about something that's happening right now? And even if it is about something that's happening right now, usually the thought is related to how I'm comparing it to something that happened in the past, or how it could relate to something that's happened in the past, or some concept that I've learned in the past, or how I'm projecting that it might play out in the future. But rarely is the thought about just taking in what's happening right now. So that's an interesting concept to explore at the moment, where it's like, oh yeah, like most of that mental chatter is either past or future. It's not in the present. And so like the Eckhart Tolle Power of Now theory seems to point to, when you are in the present, fully present in the present, the chatter, there's no chatter. Like the chatter relies on past or future. It can't comprehend present moment, even though the present moment is when anything will ever happen. So.
Yeah, wow, I love that so much. And it's quite, I want to say it's quite profound, because, the norm for people is to be living in the past, doing the worry. The worry is about the future. Guilt is often about the past, but basically none of it is in the present. And that's just what's normal for most people. Yeah. And it's certainly something that I have to watch out for, because it's like default way of thinking, because our brains were created to keep us alive, and by virtue of that, it's always on the lookout for danger.
Yeah, it's a survival mechanism for sure.
Yeah. Before we wrap up, I would love to touch on a couple of the freedom thoughts that I put near the end of the chapter. We don't have time to cover all of them, but I just think to further add into the concept of calm, I shared some of my favorite freedom thoughts that really help me create calm in my day-to-day. And the ones I want to talk about are the first and the last one on the list. I don't know if you've got the list in front of you. The first one was a quote that I once read that totally transformed the way that I looked at my life. And it was, before enlightenment, chop wood, carry water. After enlightenment, chop wood, carry water.
I love that.
When I first read that, yeah, me too. But when I first read that, I was like, what does that even mean? Chopping the wood, carrying the water, and what enlightenment? And I definitely do not consider myself to be an enlightened person, right? I figure we're on the journey. I'm on a lifelong journey towards enlightenment, and maybe I'll never get there, but I feel like as long as I'm on the journey, I'm always feeling good. But it says here, before enlightenment, chop wood, carry. And then I started to think about, what does it mean? And I realized that the chopping of wood and the carrying of water, that's all the things. There's so many things. It's the to-do list. Because I thought that once I reached some level of enlightenment, because there was once upon a time that I thought that I was going to get there, and I've evolved, and because I think when I first started to get into coaching as well, that opened up a whole new world for me, and I looked at what's possible and how I can change my thinking, and surely I can become enlightened. And when I get to this point of enlightenment, then life will be better, life will be easier. And then I just realized when I read this and I thought about it, it's like, no, like none of the stuff is going to disappear, like, because I would be frustrated. That's the other thing. I was frustrated by all the stuff. I wanted to be free of all the to-dos and the things that needed to happen to create my life the way it was apparently supposed to look by some story that I created in my head. And I realized, no, like none of the stuff is going to go away. The ultimate objective here is to experience freedom and being present and enlightenment, like just in each moment, regardless of what I'm doing.
Yeah.
And so that was that was a big one for me as a freedom thought.
Yeah. The thing that comes up for me is this
Mm.
concept of and again, I agree with you in that I feel like, you know, I'm on a journey of enlightenment. I don't feel like I'm there, but now as I say that, like I'm smiling and there's like a tinkling excitement within me, because it's almost like there's a part of me that is getting the joke of enlightenment, in the sense that when you hear the, you know, quote unquote enlightened people, or see them and experience them, their whole thing is, you know, there's nothing you have to do. You already have it. It's already in you. It's not something that you have to do to achieve. That's the kind of joke, is actually like it's who you are. And if anything, it's only artificial things that you've put on that are preventing you from seeing it. So it's really, and that's why, you know, Jesus would talk about the kingdom of heaven is inside you. It's that it's not this thing to like work hard and then you'll reach it. It's, if anything, is the work hard is in the undoing and in the seeing the truth, the truth within. But the outside is not, the outside stuff doesn't actually change. So I think that was a similar thing where I thought, oh, all of a sudden, you know, my life will completely change, in the sense of like, I won't have to do any tasks. I won't have to do, you know, any chores. And even if you look at it, that's not the case. Like you're, you know, even as an enlightened being, you would be walking around the earth doing earthly things, you know.
Yeah.
That doesn't actually change. Like the change is an internal experiential awareness change, which will, because it's the way, like it's coming from a perception point, it will inevitably change your experience of the world, therefore changing the world to you. But it's not a necessarily, you know, I'm just gonna sit and levitate you know, all day every day. That's not, it's not how it happens. Or it doesn't seem. So I love that
and what
part.
I love is all those things that we thought we'd be free of, all of the to-do items. When we take on this realization that it's within, that we are changing, then all of those things that used to be frustrating become beautiful.
Yes,
Have you
there's
noticed
a
that?
joy.
Yeah,
Yes, for sure. Yeah, it's I
it's
get
like,
to
how
do
did
this as opposed to I have to do this. Like I get to do this, you know. What joy, you know.
exactly, yeah, and that's just so freeing. Like, amazing. We could do another whole episode just on that. But I want to talk about the last point on the freedom thoughts list as well, which is the what's your hurry? And this is a really great interrupter, I find, when I'm working with coaching clients, and, you know, they're so aware of all of the things that they need to get done. And they're talking about the to-do list, and they're also stressed about blah, 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 all the things. And I will then say, what's your hurry? And I'm just thinking now, invariably, because I can't think of anyone who doesn't respond with the response of, like, basically silence, because they don't know what to say. Like, what's your, it's a serious question, you know. If they have a serious answer to the question of what's your hurry, then I will take their response seriously, and I'm not going to judge them, because there may be a really valid reason for why they're hurrying around. But that's not what happens. I ask them, what's your hurry? And they get stopped in their tracks and they realize, I don't know, what is my hurry? And because the ultimate goal really is to be happy, to be joy, to experience just peace in our lives. And those things are not dependent on getting the to-do list done.
Yeah.
So I love this, really. If
also, what's
anyone
gonna happen
listening to
when you finish that to-do list, what's going to happen? Like a new to-do list will come up.
Yes, exactly. For everything you get knocked off the list, 2 more get added even. So as we start to wrap up this conversation, I think this is a takeaway for anyone listening is, you know, if you feel yourself getting stressed and too much to do, overwhelm, really ask yourself in all seriousness, like, what's my hurry? And I think living by this philosophy links to what I was saying before, where I said, I feel like I'm one of the least stressed people that I know. It doesn't mean I never experience stress, but I'm pretty good at keeping it in check. And I also mentioned that I move at a moderate pace throughout life, just day to day. And sometimes I'll look at people who seem to be doing a gazillion things and they're doing amazing, and there's a part of my ego that will start to kick in and go, well, maybe I should be moving faster. And I'm like, nah, nah, what's the hurry? Really, my goal is to be happy right now, and I don't need to be moving as fast as that person I'm currently comparing myself to create happiness. Like, happiness is mine right now in this moment, regardless of what I do or don't do or how fast I move.
Well said. Amazing chat. As always, just want to check if there's is there anything else that we haven't addressed that you want to make sure gets covered as part of Calm? Obviously, knowing that people can go and check out the book and get the full chapter and have a read through all of the amazing stuff in there. But as part of the conversation, is there anything else that comes up for you?
No, I think we've covered some really amazing foundational stuff around calm. There'll always be more. Like, this is a lifelong journey. It's something that we're constantly learning about. So, yeah, we could keep talking about it. But I think, yeah, we've probably covered enough for today.
Oh, that's great. What's the next element? What will we cover next time?
Oh, I'm going from memory. Element 6 would be responsibility.
Responsibility. Oh,
yeah. Looking forward to that. It's one of those words that feels really heavy. Like, responsibility. It sounds like things that I've got to do. And and that's one of the big points about the chapter, is realizing how actually responsibility is your superpower if you're willing to look at it in a more effective way.
Can't wait.
Great. Thanks, Magali. Bye for now.
Thank you so much. Bye.
To get more information about the book 7 Freedom Elements and how to get a copy, go to Kylie's website, kyliezeo.com. That's KYLIEZEAL.com.